Hey man, it's been a few months. Welcome to another film. Nope, not a film breakdown, just a video. Today, we're starting my 2025 NFL team preview videos. Um, and we're just going to go division by division. Um, I've seen, formats in which people go by power rankings. I believe that fantasy guy, that football guy, is going by his power rankings. I'm just gonna go division by division, and then I'll do a power rankings video like the day before the season starts or something. But we're gonna start with the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills season preview. I want to get into how they did last year and what we can look for in 2025 in terms of play style. I want to look at who they lost, who they brought in, their draft picks, really everything to get an educated picture on what the 2025 Bills will look like. The Bills have been knocking on the door of a Super Bowl appearance for 5 years since that 2020 COVID season. And Josh Allen finally got over the hump of winning an MVP. He finally got over the hump of marrying the girl of his dreams. Now he's really set to focus on, getting this team to a Super Bowl victory. That's all he needs. He's married to Haley Steinfeld. He's won an NFL MVP. And he's the king of a city. All he needs is a Super Bowl. The Bills made it to the AFC Championship game last year, and I may be a biased Bills fan, but there were some calls in that game that prevented them from winning. Now, if they played even better, they wouldn't have had to worry about those calls, but they just weren't in their favor, and that's okay. That happens. I'm not in my Chiefs get all the calls mode quite yet. Let's wait till October till I get there. But anyways, they wouldn't have won the Super Bowl regardless. The Eagles were winning, and that was all there was to it. However, the Bills not only have to win a Super Bowl, but they got to get over the hump of just getting there in the first place. They've been to, I believe, two conference championship games now in the last 5 seasons, lost both of them, and they've had a couple quick exits in the divisional round as well. So they have to put the pieces together. And going into last year, it was really the story was okay, their offense is completely different. They've lost Stephon Diggs, which is huge. I mean, him and Josh Allen were everything together. They parted ways with Gabe Davis, which um, some people felt was bigger than it was. Gabe Davis was not good enough to be a wide receiver two, and he wanted very high end wide receiver two money. And we saw how that went in Jacksonville. It was a great decision to part with him. And they went to this mantra of everybody eats. And that's really how it was last year, except for like Curtis Samuel. Basically, everyone ate. And you kind of saw Curtis Samuel get going towards the end. Um, you see Khalil Shakir, James Cook, both had career years. Ray Davis really stepped up into the role. And I want to get into the running back room in a second here. But the overall mantra of that offense was everybody eats. Now, there were some injuries. Dalton Kincaid was hampered with a few injuries throughout the year, and that combined with just some communication issues with Josh Allen kind of led to a disconnect there for a while. But overall, they have a strong tight end room. They have a deep wide receiver room, and we'll get into the additions in a second. But we can just start with Josh Allen. Josh Allen is that guy. Okay, he's the MVP, and even if he doesn't win MVP next year, he's capable of winning it every year, and he is going to be right up there with everyone else. This, I think, losing Stephon Diggs, obviously losing talent like that isn't great, but also you have to put yourself in the mental aspect of it of you don't feel like you have to force throws to keep Diggs happy all the time. And I know that sounds like copium, but the proof was in the pudding during the season. Josh Allen, a lot less forced throws, a lot less forced turnovers, a lot less bad interceptions last year, and a lot more of just taking what the defense gives him. And that led to a really productive year. And, you know, with Keon Coleman, I would say underperforming for a rookie wide receiver picked where he was. And then the only other weapons really being uh, at the start of the year, it was Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Marquez Valdez Scantling, Mac Hollins. Whereas, Brandon Bean recognized, okay, we need another weapon. So they brought in Amari Cooper. He wasn't really like, he didn't have the Amari Cooper effect that he would in past years. So a lot of it was really in Josh Allen's hands to just will this team to victory. I think this past offseason, NFL media and Bills fans alike really expected the Bills to either A, draft a receiver in the first round, or B, uh, go out and either sign a top end wide receiver or trade for one. And they did neither. They did neither. They attacked their wide receiver room in a very different way. Honestly, in my personal opinion, I would have gone about it slightly different. I like that they didn't use a first round pick on a wide receiver, and I like that they didn't give up assets to acquire a wide receiver one. Unfortunately, the wide receiver position, it's largely a lot of, with lack of a better term, it's a very egotistical position. And to keep a wide receiver happy, you got to do a lot. So to instead just have a bunch of guys who are happy with getting 700 to 1,000 yards a season, having like three or four of those guys, as opposed to having one guy that wants 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns, and then a bunch of other guys that you can't really rely on, I'm taking option A. So so they instead signed Josh Palmer to a 3-year deal, which I think was I was surprised. I was surprised. As a guy that keeps tabs obviously on the Bills as a Bills fan, and then the Chargers, I grew up rooting for the Chargers as well in Southern California. So I keep tabs on both teams to see Palmer go from one to the other. And Palmer is from Brampton, Ontario. That's like an hour from here. Just very, very interesting. And then Elijah Moore, who was taken early in the second round of his draft class. I want to say 4 years ago, maybe by the Jets. And I remember hammering the table for Brandon Bean to take Elijah Moore at the end of the first round, and he didn't. Retrospect, that's why I'm not an NFL GM. But Elijah Moore as an option uh, in the slot, this gadgety guy who can get like 600 yards, and his cuts are still really sharp. I really like it for this offense. So now you have 4 or 5 receivers that you can rely on to make a play, and at one time. You said goodbye to Mac Hollins, which I think is huge, but you brought in 2 talented guys, and I think there's not as many limitations per player as there has been in years past. So the wide receiver room is Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, uh, Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore, Josh Palmer. That is 5 guys that will be relied upon at some point. Now, it's worth mentioning, probably 1 or 2 of those guys are going to be underwhelming next year. 1 or 2, you can't have 5 wide receivers that have 600 plus yards. It's just not going to work. If I had to guess who's going to be underwhelming, Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel. If I had to guess, Josh, it could be. I think one of the new guys is going to be a bit underwhelming, and then one of the guys who was on the team last year, either Keon Coleman or Curtis Samuel, and then either Josh Palmer. Any combination. I think Khalil Shakir is fine though. Now, what would I have done differently with the wide receiver room this offseason? Basically, instead of drafting Deion Walker, I would have drafted a wide receiver in the 4th round, or instead of drafting TJ Sanders, I would have drafted a wide receiver in the 2nd round. Either one of those, I would have swapped with a receiver. The way the board fell, though, I'm not mad. I'd rather have Jalen Royals than TJ Sanders or Deion Walker, and they just didn't bite. Jalen Royals was a top 5 receiver for me in the draft class, and I think he would have really fit in, as opposed to maybe instead of signing a guy like Elijah Moore, but maybe Moore gives them the same, if not better, production, and those interior defensive linemen are net positives for the Bills. The tight end room is interesting. You have Dawson Knox and you have Dalton Kincaid, and this has become a 20 plus personnel heavy team. And Dalton Kincaid isn't really a traditional tight end. He's more of that F player who kind of just lines up in the slot, and he's a big receiver. And Dalton Kincaid is more of that true inline tight end, good blocker, and can make a play for a few yards when he gets the ball in his hands. My rule with tight ends is you give them 3 years of development before you decide before you figure out who they are. Okay? A tight end has the responsibility of being half offensive lineman and half receiver. It's a hard task, and I think it's an underrated hard position in the NFL. Everybody talks about quarterback and cornerback. Tight end, I think, is up there. And it's just because you have to learn so much. And you have to be such a perfect blend of different skill sets. And you know, I wouldn't say that this is the cutoff year for Dalton Kincaid, as in make or break, but if we don't see progression, people could start losing hope around him. Now, I don't. I still have faith. He is a late learner to football, and he battled injuries last year. We saw flashes his rookie season. I think that he will be much better than he was last year in 2025. And then for the running game, James Cook and Ray Davis provided that perfect thunder and lightning combination on the ground. And then Ty Johnson, I think, is the best third down back in football. He's really good in those obvious passing downs, and he's one of the best blocking running backs in football. Definitely the best one on this team. So I think, honestly, Ty Johnson, in my opinion, I can't think of anyone else as the best RB3 in the NFL. He's perfect in his role. They just extended him. I think that the Bills and Joe Brady, who they managed to keep by the grace of God, they managed to keep Joe Brady. I think they're going to not be a run heavy team because you have Josh Allen, you can't do that, but they are going to rely on those guys getting them much needed yards more frequently. It's not going to be okay, Josh, go take a QB power into the defensive line and try to push forward for a few yards. No, give it to Ray Davis and do that. Circling back on the wide receivers, I think it's going to be really interesting. The only true X you have is Keon Coleman, so I think his reps are relatively safe. I don't think Josh Palmer is that true X receiver, but he is a boundary receiver. They were top three. I believe they were second or third in percentage of snaps lined up in a trips formation. That's three receivers on one side, one receiver on the other. And with the added depth to the receiver unit, where they're all kind of like, it's almost taking that Green Bay Packers wide receiver approach where it's a bunch of wide receiver twos. Who are you going to keep off the field, and who are you going to say, okay, you can stay on? And a lot of these guys have similar skill sets. I think Khalil Shakir is exclusively a slot receiver. I think Curtis Samuel is exclusively a slot receiver. I think Elijah Moore can be motioned around, and Keon Coleman is a boundary receiver. And Josh Palmer, I think, can go anywhere. You're going to have a lot of opportunities to have a lot of weapons out there at once. Are you going to stick to 21 personnel to make sure you can have two tight ends, or are you going to go more so lean into those wide receivers? I think that's an interesting question. And while there was so much to be made about the Bills' wide receiver position, they were second in EPA per play last year, behind the Baltimore Ravens at 0.18 EPA per play. EPA per pass, they were third with 0.25 EPA per pass. And in terms of EPA per rush, they were second. So Joe Brady worked magic with this roster. They are also second in EPA per play amongst teams when they ran 12 personnel. They were only behind the Baltimore Ravens, who have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely in that category. So they have a lot going for them with those two tight end formations. I'm interested to see if they're a more run heavy team, not run heavy, but if they lean into that more, they're probably going to lean into those bigger bodies more. And maybe we could see the Bills be the leader in 12 personnel next year. Now, the real problem for the Bills last year was the defense. I mean, at some points they couldn't stop a nosebleed. That Rams game in later in the season, I mean, what did the Bills score? 43 points and they still lost? Just certain instances, it was mind-boggling how poor they performed. Both the edge room and the interior defensive line was a mess. Ed Oliver, I think, underperformed. It was a down year for him for sure. Daquan Jones, probably definitely the worst year for him as a Bill, maybe the worst year of his career. And then they didn't have much depth. They had to go in midseason and bring in guys like Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson to fill in those gaps. And when you have to bring in those guys midseason, you know it's not going well. And rookie Dwayne Carter out of Duke, he didn't really live up to expectations. So you get concerned about that unit. And then the edge room, I think Greg Rousseau is blossoming into a star. But then there's a huge drop off. I think Von Miller didn't have as bad of a year as I thought he would, but he can't be your edge two. He's barely on the field. So who is it? AJ Epinesa? You lost Leonard Floyd. So you can't have AJ Epinesa be your edge two. So they go in and they bring in Joey Bosa. And they bring in Michael Hoyt, who is going to be suspended for the first half of the year, but then it's like a free agent acquisition midseason. I think he's an interesting player. He's not exclusively an edge, but he's not a linebacker. But he can also play like that star role. He's going to be kind of like a joker of the defense. Look for him to fly around. And then on the interior of the defensive line, you draft TJ Sanders and Deion Walker. Deion Walker is that traditional one tech. He is going to really just clog rushing lanes, clog the A gap. He was dealing with a back injury in 2024, and it showed. He did not put on any good tape in 2024. But 2023, he looked like a top 10 pick in the class. So we're hoping that that just has to do with injuries, and then 2025, as a rookie, he'll be back to performing his 2023 self. And then they also brought in Larry Ogunjobi, who I guess they signed without the knowledge of his PED suspension. And maybe like a day after they signed him, it was announced that he would be suspended for 6 games. So he is also going to be out. So him and Hoyt are going to return the same game. So all of a sudden, you have an interior defensive line room of Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders, Dwayne Carter, and Deion Walker. That's depth, but you have to hope at least one of if all 3 of the young guys miss, you have a huge problem. But if one of Deion Walker and Dwayne Carter and TJ Sanders hits, you're going to be okay. And if one of them can just be like a rotational guy to start, to come in for, the one tech at a certain point, you know how it works. They have to shore up that first level of the defense. And I think the additions, if Joey Bosa, I know it's a huge if Joey Bosa can stay relatively healthy to be that edge 2 alongside Greg Rousseau, he's going to get a lot of favorable matchups. Okay? He's going to get a lot. He played 14 games last year. As a Bills fan, you better hope that, he can play another 14. That would be great. 14 games out of Joey Bosa, you'll take that all day. And he even said that the healthiest he felt was that wild card game against the Texans. And it showed. He played great. So you got to hope that you get games out of Joey Bosa. You got to hope that when Michael Hoyt comes back, he is, exactly what you want him to be. And you got to hope Greg Rousseau takes another step. And then the interior of the defensive line, I think, is definitely shored up. I think it should be a lot better. You know what that does? An improved first level allows the linebackers to be free. The Bills, one thing they are not a big team. And their linebackers are no different. They're both probably 6'2", 6'3", both around 220, 230 in terms of weight. Terrell Bernard, great in coverage, not so great shedding blockers at the line of scrimmage. So he can kind of get displaced. If he has a first level of the defense that can take care of those blockers and he can get into the backfield free, he's going to be like a heat-seeking missile. Same with Matt Milano. He's a bit smaller. They both have tackling issues. If Matt Milano can stay healthy, and if the defensive linemen in front of him do their job, both of these guys could be all pros. They won't be, because that's not how the NFL works. But, they could both be Pro Bowlers. And then that brings us to the last level of defense, the secondary. Another bit of a tricky situation. Last year was definitely improved, okay? Last year was the first full year where they ripped the Band-Aid off. You have to say goodbye to the greatest safety tandem in the NFL for the last 7 years, I would say. Not every year were they the greatest, but over that span, that was probably the best one. And definitely the best in team history. And then Rasul Douglas took a step back last year. He was noticeably slower. Really a strictly zone corner. And that puts you in a box in terms of what you can do as a defense. Now, instead of Rasul Douglas, you draft Maxwell Harrison, a speed guy who I think can play both zone and man. Obviously, he's quick enough and fast enough to stay with those faster receivers, but he also has the ball skills to and instincts, I think, to play zone. So I think he's a great partner alongside Christian Benford. And then you got depth. You brought back Trey White, which I think is great for the locker room and great for the cornerback room, even if he doesn't touch the field. I think he's great for a guy like Maxwell Harrison. You brought back Dane Jackson for depth, a guy that, knows the team and knows the scheme. And then you have Teron Johnson, who I think is the best nickel in football, or at least up there. It depends who you classify as a nickel. And then at the safety, you have Taylor Rapp, who is a definite starter. And then the starter alongside him is kind of up in the air. Is it Cole Bishop? I personally think it should be. Is it DeMar Hamlin? Let's just make it Cole Bishop. Uh, he started the game against Houston in the regular season and he looked lost. And then he started some games towards the end of the season and he looked really good. So I think it's time. He was in the 2024 draft. Cole Bishop, I believe, was my 10th overall prospect, and they got him in the second round. Just let him play. Let him play. I think he'll be good. And as a whole, the Bills' defense was a negative .01 EPA per play defense last year, which was good enough for 12th in the league. To win a Super Bowl, you got to be better than middle of the pack as a defense. I think EPA per play is the best measurement, whether it's for defense or offense, in terms of measuring how good your unit was. And, it shows. EPA per play, who was best in the league? The Denver Broncos. Who was second? The Eagles. Third, the Vikings. Those were the top three defenses last year, I think by consensus. So the Bills being 12th is problematic when you think about the fact that they're trying to win a Super Bowl. I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with the 12th best defense. When you're playing teams that have, the second ranked offense and the fourth ranked defense, you can't have the third ranked offense and the 12th ranked defense. You gotta, those splitting hairs matters when it gets to January and February. Against the pass, the Bills ranked 22nd in EPA per play. 22nd. That's brutal. But they were fifth against the run. So they needed to shore up that secondary. And honestly, while they were 22nd in EPA per pass, I think it does a lot of that comes from the front seven. Can you rush the quarterback and force him to make a bad throw, or are you giving him all the time in the world? And I think the Bills defense, that is, relied heavily on splash plays last season. And the law of averages suggests that, that can't last forever. So they're going to have to rely on being a sturdy defense and, not allowing chunk plays and not, just banking on getting turnovers and instead holding offenses and stopping them in their tracks. Now, what I do in my articles that I'm posting for each team and their season preview, I am going month to month in the schedule, and I am giving you the team's record for each month. Because I don't want to say, okay, the Bills play the Saints week 4, they win that game. Anything can happen. But if they lose that game somehow, then they're gonna have to equal it out by beating the Ravens week 1. So it's kind of that, it could go either way. And I just want to give an overall of what I think their record will be at the end of the year. So let's take a look at their schedule. They start the season at home against the Ravens on Sunday Night Football, week 1. Then week 2, they're on the road taking on the Jets, afternoon game. And then week 3, they host the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. And then they close out September at home against the Saints. In those 4 games, I have them going 3-1. They'll probably pick up a loss. Could be against the Ravens right away. But after that Ravens game, they've got a pretty smooth sailing schedule till after the bye week. And then we get to October. Week 5, they're hosting the Patriots on Sunday Night Football again. Week 6, in Atlanta against the Falcons on Monday Night Football. Then they have a really early Week 7 bye. I think that's problematic for them. They are going to really want to push for that 1 seed bye, because to play from week 8 all the way till the conference championship is going to be taxing. Week 8 at Carolina against the Panthers, Sunday 1 o'clock game. I'll be there. Week 9, Sunday late afternoon game against the Chiefs at home. Or excuse me, that's November. We're not going to get to that yet. So in October, we only have 3 games. Hosting the Patriots on Sunday Night Football, traveling to Atlanta to play the Falcons on Monday Night Football, Week 7 bye, and then traveling to Carolina to take on the Panthers. I got the Bills going 3-0 in that stretch. 3-0. So right now we're sitting at 6-1. November, we see, like I said, hosting the Chiefs late afternoon game, and then Week 10, traveling to South Beach, taking on the Dolphins, 1 o'clock game. Hosting the Buccaneers Week 11, playing the Houston Texans in Houston on Thursday Night Football, and playing in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. I'm going to say they go 4-1 in that stretch. Could easily go 3-2. If they were to lose 2 games, it would probably be the Chiefs and the Bucks, but I think playing the Bucks at home is huge. I guess I could see them losing to the Texans too, but you know, November is when it ramps up, and those Super Bowl caliber teams have to find their stride. The final stretch, we're going to combine January and December. So you're hosting the Bengals, traveling to play the Patriots, traveling to play the Browns, hosting the Eagles, and then hosting the Jets on either that Saturday or Sunday. I bought tickets to that game because it's the last game in Highmark Stadium. Yeah, I'm going to have the Bills going 3-2 in this final stretch. 3-2 because I gave them the benefit of the doubt in like the November stretch to go 4-1. I gave them 3-0 in October, and I gave them 3-1 in September. So I'm not going to keep giving them the breaks, and I'll say they drop 2. Maybe it's to the Eagles and the Bengals. Maybe it's to the Eagles and they rest all their starters in Week 18 against the Jets. I don't know, but maybe it's against the Patriots. I definitely think they win this one. And if they're playing their guys, they definitely win this one. But that's a big if, especially nowadays. So I'm going to say they go 13-4. That's probably not good enough for the 1 seed in the AFC. But it's good enough for probably 2 home games, I would say. And then anything happens in the postseason. With this new playoff format, I don't like the 1 bye per conference thing. With the new playoff format, I feel like it's a lot more of a sure thing that the team with the bye gets into the Super Bowl. The rest is so crucial, and it's shown every year. But we'll see how it goes. I have them going 13-4. We'll see what happens. They could end up 10-7. I don't see it, but they could end up 15-2. Don't see that either. But thank you for watching. Let me know if you guys liked this style of video, if you are even watching. I didn't want to like have a bunch of highlights and this, that, and the third. I kind of just wanted to present my information. I had bullet points, but not really like a strict talking about this, not a strict script. Let me know if you like the more leisurely vibe, or if you want like cut and dry, like I need to stick to a script instead of kind of just more of the podcast feel. But anyways, I appreciate you guys so much for watching. I will be doing this for every single team. So thank you very much. If you liked, if you wouldn't mind liking the video, that'd be really cool. And then you can also subscribe. I hit 100 subscribers, which was pretty neat, if I do say so. I love you very much, and I will see you probably Monday for my next one. Deuces.